Wow. Welcome. Welcome, everyone, to our panel this morning. I'm Julia Maxwell. I'm the Executive Director of the European Video On Demand Coalition. It's a Brussels-based organization founded in 2020 to give a voice to the fastest growing part of the audiovisual industry, the video on demand sector. We have companies of all sizes as part of our coalition, and we advocate for fair policies that stimulate growth, innovation, and fair competition. I'm delighted to moderate what promises to be a very timely and engaging discussion as Europe moves towards evaluating the Audiovisual Media Services Directive, that is the key legal instrument regulating media in Europe, and it decides whether or not to have a revision, whether that's necessary. We find ourselves at a bit of a crossroads. On the one hand, we have ambitious cultural and economic goals to promote European content, grow creative ecosystems, and maintain global relevance. On the other hand, we face real questions about whether the regulatory and market conditions support that vision, or whether they could be misaligned or excessively burdensome for players in the market. We are fortunate to have a panel of top voices from across the audiovisual landscape, from streaming to data analysis, production, broadcasting, and public policy, to unpack these issues. So let's get into it. Christian, you are the Senior Analyst at the European Audiovisual Observatory, where you specialize in the circulation of European audiovisual works across broadcast and on-demand platforms. Your research offers detailed insights into how content moves across borders, how quotas are being met, and how different services contribute to European visibility. Thank you for being here. It's important to say that as part of the observatory, he is not able to give policy recommendations or opinions, but you are very much going to set the scene for us today. So my questions that I'm asking you up front, and that I think you have a wonderful presentation to address, are: does your data tell us how the AVMSD has influenced investment in European works? And does the data show that the current quota and reporting obligations are achieving the intended outcomes? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Julia. So to start the presentation, just a short overview of how the European audiovisual market has evolved since 2018 and the revision. So there was clearly growth, but most of the growth came from over-the-top players, digital players, Netflix, Amazon on the subscription market, YouTube, Meta on the advertising market. Of course, our traditional players, broadcasters, have also launched their digital offers to adapt to the streaming age, but they are lacking the scale these global players have. And of course, this gives them a competitive advantage. And I think the best to illustrate the changes that have happened on the audiovisual market since 2018 is to look at the subscription market. Here we are talking about pay TV and SVOD services. And on the video advertising market, where linear television advertising is more and more in competition with video sharing platforms and digital players. So let's dig in. If we look at the pay TV market, SVOD subscription have clearly overtaken pay TV subscription since 2018. As you can see, explosive growth for SVOD subscriptions, while pay TV subscription grew moderately or almost stagnant. On the revenue side, this has also translated into an increase of SVOD revenues, while pay TV revenues were stagnant. But as you can see, even having more subscription than pay TV, it's generating less total revenues. This is, of course, one of the underlying difficulties of this new digital age. The average revenue per user is much lower than in the traditional business, and this underlines the need for scale. If we're looking at the video advertising market since 2018, as you can see, on a European scale, linear TV advertising has actually decreased. The growth has come from video sharing platforms and more recently AVOD and fast channels. As you can see, traditional linear advertising is clearly challenged by this new entrance on the advertising market. And now, how does it translate into market structure and competitive forces? If we look at the top 10 players on the subscription market, pay TV and SVOD, you can see that in 2023, 3 digital players are in the top 10 players on the European market: Netflix, Amazon, and Disney+. On the advertising side, it's the same. The top 2 players are YouTube and Meta, and TikTok has made a full-grown entrance into this top list. If we look more generally now at the top 100 European TV players, you can see that since 2016, the market has grown, but most of this growth was captured by OTT players, which have managed to increase their market share 6-fold in this time period. So now with looks on the VMSD, let's look at content investments and the share of European works. 2024, streaming services already represent 1/3 of original European content investments. However, they are mostly allocating these investments in a handful of countries in which they produce a lot and then circulate this European content in other European countries. When it comes to the share of European works in VOD catalogs, the quota is met. We see an average share of 32%, but here it's only average. And you also have to see that the majority of EU works in these catalogs is non-national origin, except in a handful of big markets. This means that a lot of local audience don't have that much access to local books. Let's dig quite in. In 2024, more than 25 billion euros were invested into original European content. As you can see, streamers are around 1/3, with the big streaming services Netflix, Amazon, and Disney+ accounting for the lion's share of these investments. What does this mean for European content investments? As you can see, traditional broadcasters have only increased their investments by 1 billion since 2018, and most of the growth of the European content market came actually from streamers' investments. But as I've said, if we look now at how do these streamers allocate these investments, we can see that they are favoring a handful of countries here. The top 2 markets are clearly the UK and Spain. If we compare to the traditional allocation by broadcasters, you can see that streaming services are over-investing in a handful of countries and less investing in other countries. Now, the share of European works, we have said 30% on average. Here you have an overview of more than 1,000 VOD catalogs in the European Union. What you can see is that in the middle, around the 30% quotas, here we find most of our generalist VOD services as for TVOD. But what is interesting is to look at the extremes. On the right-hand side, you have a lower share of European works and catalogs. Here we are mostly talking about niche VOD services, such as specializing in anime or Bollywood content. On the other side, you have a high share of European content. Here it's mostly the catalogs of national broadcasters who favor local national content and European content. And finally, as I've said in the introduction, if we look now at the composition by European works of these catalogs, as you can see, in most of the countries, there's a low share of actually national works, local works, except for bigger markets, France, Italy, Germany, which have a high share of national works in VOD catalogs. Most of the markets have actually non-national European works, meaning that works from other countries produced in Spain, France, Germany are circulating in these VOD catalogs. And this was it for me. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Christian. I think that was really, really helpful. The 30% European works quota was one of the key differences the last time the Audiovisual Media Service Directive was revised. For context, linear services have a 50% European works obligation, which probably many of you know. Chris, so we've heard that the data says VOD catalogs seem to be hitting that 30%, maybe even slightly more. But we're also seeing that the types of European works tend to focus on the 4 or 5 big markets and a lot less sort of national works being produced in smaller markets. So from your perspective, the data suggests that maybe the goals of the AVMS from the last time are being met, but what is your perspective?
Julia, Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, the data speak for themselves, I think. I mean, there's a clear storyline there. On one level, the directive has indeed been successful. We have achieved that target level of 30% or more European content, which is in and of itself an accomplishment. I think, I tend to be an optimist. I look at the glass as being half full and opportunities for improvements in the future. I think that if you look more closely at how some of the streamers have approached markets in Europe, you'll find differences. I think even though I have frequently had comments about Netflix that have not been that positive, I think on the whole, if you look at the efforts that they have made, I think they've tried to comply with the letter, but also sometimes even the spirit of the directive, which I think is to their credit. So I'll say that for the record. They fall short in a number of areas, but okay, those are maybe areas we need to talk about in terms of improvement. I think there are loopholes in the directive now. One is one you alluded to, Julia, which is that the idea of cultural diversity, which is supposed to be a concept that applies to all of Europe, to all of the member states, in fact doesn't. Let's face it. I mean, we need to be blunt about it. You don't see the small countries in that whole list of countries that are the beneficiaries of increased investment in content. My country, Croatia, so now I speak just for Croatia rather than for all of the 37 film agencies that I also represent. We have almost no benefit from the directive, at least not in terms of investment. We have seen Netflix put an effort into acquiring titles and making them visible, and that's one of the reasons why I complimented them in terms of the spirit of the directive. It is important to us that what little content of Croatian origin is actually available because of a small investment obligation that streamers have is visible, so that and there are new audiences coming to those films. I have heard people say, I didn't know we made movies like that in Croatia, which was on the one hand great news. On the other hand, it sort of makes me wonder whether we're doing a good enough job making people aware of what we produce. But there are also other loopholes in the directive. We have one of the major streamers arguing that they have no obligation to do anything in Croatia because they don't target us, but they're widely available, they're widely subscribed to, and they do nothing for us. Absolutely nothing. I won't name them, but I think it's pretty obvious who's been growing and who takes the view that they're not targeting, so they have no obligation. So, that in a nutshell, I think the directive has been helpful. You have to see it in the context of its origins in the Television Without Frontiers directive, which was then complemented by the media program, which did grow European production substantially. And it's a continuum. And I think, we're looking to a process of review now to see whether the objectives have been met. We as EFAD, as all of the European film agencies, have not taken a decision yet on whether to advocate a reopening of the directive or maybe other approaches to fine-tune it. But it has been successful to a certain extent. There is a substantial scope for improvement.
Okay, thank you very much. And it is maybe useful for the audience to know that the majority of industry representation is currently saying haven't made a decision, but we don't particularly want a reopening at this point. Although, who knows, we've got a year to go and there's that may well change. Thank you, Chris. Vanda, you've seen the data, thinking about Viaplay, the markets it's in, etc. Do you think the quotas and the investment obligations have been helpful in supporting Viaplay's growth and content strategy, or have they perhaps added to a certain amount of administrative burden and costs?
They have been aligned, I would say, because up to now, although you can see the administrative burden, the quotas, on one hand, it has not been hard to fulfill. And on that, from the perspective that on this, I would like to say that quotas is fulfillable because it is based on the hours, and that sometimes it doesn't. Many can fulfill them without significant investment, which is something I would like to note. So yes, we have to answer your questions. We have been comfortably fulfilling the 30% quota. One, because we are a local streamer and local broadcaster who have been investing for years in local content. So of course, in our catalog, we have a lot of both local but other European shows. So that is not hard for us to fulfill from that perspective. But also, it is a fact that other streamers or other players in various markets where they simply needed to fulfill, but they could do it simply by adding a lot of I don't know, British content or French content or
relevant.
And also more relevant is one, but also less reflecting the diversity of Europe. Because for me, the quotas, of course, would have the aim was that there is not only the local investment, but also that there is a reflection on the European diversity. And that, unfortunately, in practice, you don't see.
Okay.
But still, yes, we're fine with the 30%.
And do you, just a very quick follow-up, something we were talking about earlier, do you think that the creating this 30% obligation for all VOD services means there's perhaps less, European players like Viaplay have lost a little bit of that unique selling point when you think that now the perhaps global streamers also have to put on, or is it not really sort of impacted?
I think that my personal view is, yes, of course, when it happened, you could see that because the global streamers were forced to have more European works, they were forced to become more relevant in a way to local audiences, which was the local players' USP. At the same time, it has led to investment in European works. And I think actually the global streamers would have, especially the big ones, would have done it anyway in order to grow, because that is actually driving their growth. So commercially, it would not have been an unreasonable decision. And then with regards to the investment, because one is the quotas that are based on the hour count in a way, and key count even old hours as well as new. With regards to the investment, of course, sometimes can be burdening in the reflection in the national laws. And of course, that should be done smartly so that you have a true incentive, but not prevent meaningful or sustainable business.
So here we're talking, what you were saying is with the investment obligations, which is another sort of new aspect from the revision from 2018, allows member states, if they want to create an investment obligation or levy or a hybrid of the two in their market, to encourage greater investment into European but also national content. So yeah, I think
So some alignment on that would help if there is to be any.
right.
So because certain countries may choose what can be perceived as unreasonable restrictions, or depending on what they count, e.g. or revenue and
Okay, thank you. Branko.
Yes.
We're talking about quotas and levies. From your perspective, I'm thinking about, again, smaller markets such as Slovenia. Good thing? Bad thing?
Quotas in general are stupid things.
Okay.
Especially for the people in
Tell
the
us-
creative world. I mean, we have to protect chief content officers and program directors and people who handle the content, because that's part of their job, to be creative and come up with the ideas and shows, not to be prescribed how many hours of something which you have to put on the air. So it smells like old times in our region, where we also had quota, but different types of quotas. And content people were political commissars. No, I mean, the effect or directive for the small or middle-sized markets, especially in Central and Eastern Europe, the effect is zero, because the business has to move where the audience is. So, and there is a natural transition from linear broadcasting to the streaming, but the directive is not helping in that direction. Actually, I guess it's hurting us, because while we are pushing our big competitors to throw money in European works, that's part of our identity, and they're increasing the cost by effective for us, because the Americans can always come with a better budget for the series, and that's automatically increase the cost for the local players. It's stupid, honestly. Second point, incentives. Incentives is public money. It's out of my pocket, your pocket. So how we are spending incentives? We are giving this incentive for American production in our territories, for production services, which takes the best people from our markets for American products, which come back via platforms or via our license fees for studios. Is this smart? I guess not, but it doesn't make sense for protecting the European cause or local cause. So there's a lot of things to rethink, but when politics thinks, usually the common sense dies.
So producers might have the different ideas.
I know the producers, it's part of the cake, but I'm speaking on behalf of broadcasters and streamers from the Central Eastern Europe. So the incentives should be, put on the table of the local guys, not of international guys. And sorry, let's take out the big guys from European quota, but let's bring their money in. And this money should be distributed to the countries for their local projects, not for the investment, because otherwise we will be hurt again. So it's a very unfair game, which is, I guess, supported also a bit by directive, and it's a good time to rethink what to do. It's like we are now in Croatia. Croatia is a small country, so in sports, it's a game and rules. So even a small country in sport can win the big country. Now imagine Croatia is going to the World Cup next year, and there will be a ruling, Luka Modric is too old, he cannot play. Or the Croatian team should have 10 players from Dubrovnik. There were never good football players from Dubrovnik. Or, they cannot win. It's impossible. But there are rules of the game. And so let's be more sporty. Let's have the same rules or not play the same game. So Europe has to decide. I would say, let's not compete with the big guys. Let's play our game, European game. Let's support the local authentic stories, not to bother with what Netflix will do. Just take the money. Sorry.
It's a wonderful idea. All I would say is, from a legal perspective, we just need to make sure that idea would be.
The legal word is very stretched nowadays, starting from America. So we can stretch it too.
But Branko, because I like the idea, but I'm sorry, I will question it. Even if there was no quotas or regulations, do you think that they would not, that were the bigger streamers would not do exactly the same because it's good for their business?
Yes, they would do, but now they are supported.
Okay.
They're coming here because the production is cheaper, not because we look nice. So.
Thank you. Maria, moving on. Yesterday, we heard the announcement from Netflix that they are going to, or they intend to invest €1 billion in the Spanish content market in the next 3 years. Now that your focus is on production, is that welcome news? Do you think, again, the quotas and investment obligations that the AVMS sets out, do they succeed? Is it helpful?
Or not, or all the above. Yes. Well, I'm here with lots of caps. I have now a producer hat on, and as being a producer, I'm very happy to have such a big investment in Spain, and I think it does work really well because it creates an industry. So I a little bit disagree with you, even though I'm a big fan of you. But I disagree with the fact that if international players in the market come and make a big investment, they create a lot of industry infrastructure. There's so much, the money invested on production in a country, you get the spread amount and specialization of content, specialization of the industry, and it reflects in a lot of wealth. I have seen, coming from Spain and being such a popular country lately to produce, first of all, because we had great sceneries and very inexpensive access to, looking like the Far West. We looking like, there's so many different areas in Spain that could adapt to different countries, etc. And just because it was less expensive. And now moving on into a different level of reasons why they go on, shoot series in Spain because of something that we'll speak about surely right after. But it has created an industry that is now very solid. And I think when you think about a country from the government point of view, I do see the point of incentivizing investment on movies and giving back some of the value that is being spent in the country because it creates a very solid industry. Now, I have had the hat of a local platform, and I have seen on the budgets that we had the problem of inflation, which was a great topic yesterday, on inflation from the big players coming into the territory to produce, that also made us have a much harder job when we were producing content. So it does become, and the question you asked, Vanda, it does become, because of regulation, you all of a sudden have a competitor on board that you were not planning on having before, because you have this very distinguished, very different, unique local view of things. And all of a sudden you don't. So it's a shame. But I think it's also very important. The Spanish hype is very important, and I'm going to wear the hat of, as a European. So I also wear the hat of a mother of 2 daughters. And as a mother of 2 daughters who celebrates Halloween, which, by the way, has nothing to do with my culture, and which very often sits with friends, Spanish friends, and celebrates Thanksgiving. Very strange. We love turkey, but really. And, it is interesting to have such a big investment and such a big export in European culture and in European content. So I think there's if I wear the hat of a European, not of a Spanish, I'm very happy that there's such a big volume of Spanish content, European content flowing on platforms, so that we not only have influence or hegemony on the European, non-European culture coming in, but we also have our own roots being shown on great content and great production. And that is something that probably was the origin of it, was in the quotas. I'm not a big quota fan, but I know how useful they can be in order for us to put some money into storytelling from territories that would otherwise not be great storytellers. And I see that having happen in Spain. So.
Okay, very interesting. So quotas, yes, useful. Investment obligations could maybe have the unintended consequence of a bit of an inflationary effect on production costs. I'm going to come over, Chris. I'm coming straight to you. Straight to you. So very happy to hear your thoughts on what the previous panelists have said, but also we think about the AVMS directive and the fact I think, Branko, you mentioned chief content officers or channel managers. One of their main role is to have some editorial decision-making and creativity in the type of content they commission, we would argue that our services know our customers best and know what content they want to watch, and so should have a certain amount of commercial freedom to decide what to commission, etc., what to acquire. How do we balance that with the need to ensure that enough European work is made, enough national work is made, Chris?
Yeah, I think, we can argue about how effective quotas have been, but they have made a difference in the production mix of broadcasters over the years and are making a difference in the production mix of streamers. And we also, we can't lose sight of the fact that there's something that holds Europe together, which is important, and that is the diversity of the countries. And so Slovenia deserves to be able to make sure that its language is present in the commercial channels and on the streaming platforms. That is an obligation that I think we have towards our citizens. It's reflected in a cultural diversity convention that has with it gives the member states the flexibility to legislate in this area. And with all due respect to commercial operators and pop TV, which are single-purpose, profit-oriented, which is all legitimate, that is not the only thing in life that matters. And we have to be mindful of that, and that is our responsibility of, amongst other things, our elected officials. So I would, and I would also argue that the idea that we can get the streamers to transfer wealth to pop TV and others to make their productions is kind of, it's a nice comment to make, but it's illusory. And also the effects of I mean, they call it market incentives, but it's state aid really that's provided also to the streamers by states. And even if we eliminate it, yeah, of course they are. When you give special tax regimes, special shelters, that is taking money that could have gone to build a hospital in Ljubljana and giving it to those who are making content, which is a legitimate decision that society makes. But it is public money foregone that goes to other players. And I think one needs to be mindful of that. And also, the final comment I'd make about the state aid, which is pervasive, not just in Europe. I mean, the Americans have state aid. Every state of the union provides state aid. There's a big discussion now about augmenting the state aid in California. It's a kind of a game that's played by those who benefit from the state aid to play one country off against the other and to keep building up the state aid. We have a system in Croatia of 25% to promote shooting here. We now look at neighboring countries that are as high as 40%. And, you have to ask yourself where that stops. How much of the so-called incentives, if you want to use the term, the polite term, the real term is state aid. How much state aid you want to provide and need to provide as a society. Sorry, I'm off, but I think there are so many things said here that needed some reaction. So,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, one reflection is the role of public service in all of this, and that one would argue that perhaps the duty to create local language and compelling storytelling is something that public service is one of the key functions of public service as well. And when that requirement is also put on all players targeting a market, does it take away from the public services value? I don't want to say, but is there an impact there that yes, as a consequence of the AVMSD might not be ideal? Is just one reflection I had. We saw in Christian's presentation video sharing platforms. And of course, video sharing platforms are partly, there's a little bit of regulation under the Audiovisual Media Services Directive, but certainly not to the same extent that on-demand players are, and definitely not to the extent that linear channels have obligations and requirements. And I'm curious to hear the panel's thoughts on whether we think more obligations should fall on video sharing platforms, or whether we should leave them in their place, being regulated by other legal instruments that the Commission has brought forward recently, such as the Digital Services Act, the Digital Markets Act. So, Vanda, I'm going to come to you relatively quickly. Do you think video sharing platforms should have more rules? One might sort of argue they compete for advertising and eyeballs, but maybe don't have the same requirements on the advertising side.
Absolutely. And the first things that we've been saying, or originally with the advent of streamers or new players like the video sharing platforms, has been, let's have level playing field so that everyone complies with the same. And if we have restrictions, they should have restrictions. And there is a rationale in that, I suppose, but that is more of a, since I'm hurt, you should hurt too. But what will actually help under the industry circumstances, under the various, not only from the video sharing platforms and social media, and so very many places where advertising money can be spent, and the need of support of local broadcasters and streamers, I would say that we all need less regulation on the advertising. And rather than we can turn it to a level playing field the other way around.
So level down some as opposed to leveling up. Okay, gotcha. Thank you. Branko, same question to you.
Yeah, I think we should start with first step with the recognition that YouTube is not only video sharing platform, but actually a streamer which is slowly but surely taking number one on the main gatekeeper, which is TV set. And that accordingly to this, we should also, Europe should then define the policy how to regulate their field in content and in advertising. But I think we should stop pretending that they are just video sharing platform. It was ages ago when they were actually just video sharing platform. They're our main competitor if we are compete for the time of our viewers. Secondly, our organization work in very regulated environment, especially in advertising, which is good. But then we have to have the same rules for everybody who is focusing on the same markets. Now we have this duality and incapability of local regulators to do anything actually, because the main argument is we don't have legal ground to act against YouTube or Netflix or whoever. And this duality is actually hurting the local businesses more than we think, and it has long-term consequences. And I should urge the directive should address more firmly this than just with a soft talk or soft definitions.
And would you have the same rules apply for everything, or are there particular parts of the directive that you think?
I think it's also related to the country of origin rule, which today is a joke because it's a one lawyer operation and you are in Luxembourg or Ireland, officially, legally. And that this original country rule should be turned around into what is your focus market. And
so a country of destination.
Yeah, because it's not just European quotas regulation, it's local, which are even more strict in some cases than European. In terms of the content, you have European quota, you have a local quota, local independent quota, and local not so independent quota. So many quotas. But if your focus market is, Slovenia, Croatia, Poland, Czech Republic, it doesn't matter. You should apply the same rule like local players.
Okay, very interesting ideas. Maria?
Yeah, I totally agree with you on imposing the same regulation that we have. I mean, we know that the sharing platforms are the biggest one, YouTube. There's a lot of differences between that and any other SO platform. So the regulation had to adapt to a possibility of trying to impose any kind of regulations on a platform where everyone can upload any kind of video. So the technology or the capacity or the DNA of that original platform was something very different. But I think if you have their channels that have 500,000, 1 million to 300 million, there's so many really professional channels within YouTube, just to name it, that they have such a huge reach and they're totally out of control, and where no one is responsible for the kind of news you have. And when you compare it to different outlets where the editorial side is so well curated and they're just mixed with channels from YouTube that could just say anything. I think for us to keep a very healthy understanding of the news, of the standards, of trying to control what things flow into our children or what information is spread is incredibly important to consider them also a communication system, the same as television. It no longer matters, the whole regulation is very strongly based on the technology under which that communication is done, whether it's linear, not linear, on demand, what kind of model, whether it's pay, subscription, hybrid. I think we should stop thinking that way and looking at time spent and reach of the signal, and reach should be added into the responsibility of those that are editorially creating the content. Yeah.
Okay, so not a lot of distinction between some of the most professional YouTubers and sort of AV services. Chris, your view.
I agree with most of what has been said by both Maria and Franco. I think a level playing field needs to be established. It doesn't exist now. That is a problem. It's not right to be competing in that sort of an environment. the directive is lagging. It's not surprising at the time when the directive was really being debated and when the terms were set, streamers barely existed, and so there was this, will they be able to meet a 30% quota idea, which at the time seemed relevant, quickly became not so relevant, really. So there is a need for the directive to be in tune with the times, and the times have certainly changed. And in terms of country of destination, it's very heartening to hear endorsements of the concept. I think it's very relevant to the whole idea of cultural diversity. Country of destination, the markets of destination are regulated in a certain way, and it's right and just that those who are participating in that market should be contributing to the policies of those countries. So all good to hear.
Good to hear as well. With our final sort of few minutes, I would like to ask each of you, if you were speaking to the European Commission, who has to take on board all of this feedback and evaluate and decide what to do, what is one recommendation you would give them about the directive? And that might be, don't reopen, we can find other ways to address concerns, or it might be something concrete that you would like to see change. So I think I will start with Vanda. One thing and a justification very quickly, please, in our time left.
If I have to come down to one thing, that is to have the understanding that obviously it's not about numbers, and European culture cannot easily be counted in numbers, but of course the diversity and the plurality should be reflected, and incentives should be there, but should be put in a smart way to reach the desired results. That's a very general statement, but if I have to bring it down to one, that is it. To have results that actually reflect the diversity, both in the local markets, but across Europe as well, and not just tick boxes that actually harm.
Got it. Branko.
The question of the panel was, are we ready to be successful? My point is that we will be successful in broadcasting and streaming, not because of directive, but despite of the directive. Because our creativity is the only joker which we have in order to succeed. We can only hope and pray that the directive will not create too many obstacles, but I believe in our creativity, European creativity or national creativity, however you could call it. And whatever culture is happening currently in America is actually helping us a lot.
So essentially, natural kind of market conditions, consumer demand, and creativity should provide the answer without legislation to require. Got it. Maria.
I think we live in a moment where, if we put aside all the fears we have with regulations, with impact on the industry, with AI taking jobs, but if we look at the broader picture, we see it's a huge trend towards disintermediation. And that is a problem. We see direct-to-consumers platforms and direct-to-consumers models, whether it is in Substack with journalists going directly to readers, whether it is with OnlyFans, with creators being directly connected to fans, or whatever that is, or Airbnb. And on television, we have something very similar, which is the sharing platforms, whether you call it Instagram or is TikTok or is YouTube. And I think that should be our focus. We have to be ahead of time and to understand those platforms as the sharing video platforms. When the impact of AI creates a much bigger volume of content available, they're not going to go into the great players that we see in the market. They're going to go to direct-to-consumer, platforms of video sharing platforms. And that is where the consumption is going to be much bigger. When we look at the growth of, as we have spoken about, some of the players, there's a completely professional content and a huge distribution. So my question or my demand or my hope for the European Union is that they look into these and they prepare for that moment so that we're a little bit ahead of time and we prepare for those platforms to play the same game, because we're playing the same game. Please don't change the rules. This is going to happen, and it's clearly, it's growing. So the wall is coming to us. The wave is coming to us. We're going to get wet. So let's get ready for a video sharing platforms to also control and to be able to apply the same rules so that we all play the same game and it's fair to us.
So, Señor Bastiale on Spanish YouTube. Next in the thing.
Thank you, Maria. Chris, very quickly.
Yes, I think the verdict is still out on the direction of travel of some of the video sharing platforms. They're beginning to resemble, I think, some of the more traditional platforms. And so rushing to say, let's see. I think we're seeing a trend there. They are important and they need to be addressed. I think that the key area for focus should be on the lack of uniformity in the definition of an independent producer. There's a lot of discretion there, which leads to confusion about what is a European work, actually, in essence. And so, and there's room within the directive to look at the conditions that are now selective. You have 3 options. I think you make those cumulative, and you also then apply that to European works, and you have a lot less confusion in the market, a lot fewer problems, and a lot more focus on the intended beneficiaries of some of the policies that are promoted by the directive, namely in the area of diversity as expressed by independent European production.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think we've had a real diversity of views here. There's no clear answer in terms of what we're looking for, but a couple of things are noteworthy. I think quotas and investment obligations are here to stay. The question is, can we make them workable and work for not just big markets, but small markets, not just purely for bigger markets' content, but every market's content as well. I think on video sharing platforms, there's certainly a lot of interest. They are capturing a huge amount of viewing time, and increasingly the top influencer channels are looking a lot like audiovisual media services. Should more obligations come to them, or should we level down other players in the market, maybe on sort of advertising sides, or keep some basic rules around protecting minors and protecting everyone from harmful content, but letting the market maybe sort of evolve itself without additional layers of regulation. We have no idea where it's going to go, but over the next 12 months or more, there'll be a lot more discussions and a lot of engagement with policymakers. And in December, we're expecting the outcome of the evaluation. Whether or not that will be with a proposal to revise the AVMSD, we will wait and see. But otherwise, it just leaves me to thank our amazing panelists here this morning and to you for coming and listening to our discussion.
Thank you very much for leading it.
For your time.
Well done.